that's not very good. Let's move on. Just two things, AGIL, which is the functional prerequisites, and moving equilibrium or dynamic equilibrium, and so on. So how can Parsons AGIL framework be used to analyze key problems in a society? So we have to explain the AGIL, that how this AGIL thing basically works in relation to the Parsonian framework. And from there, we can always move on to other ideas. So basically, when he talks about AGIL, you have to point out that this is a value addition, that Parsons for the first time writes or formulated the idea of AGIL, the schema, in this work called Working Papers in the Theory of Action. Working Papers in the Theory of Action. This particular work he did with Robert Bales and Edward Shills. So Parsons, Bales, Robert Bales, Edward Shills, and of course SHILS, and Parsons. Three of them work together on this piece work called Working Papers in the Theory of Action, and in this Parsons has referred to AGIL, which is what he calls functional prerequisites. So basically Parsons is very clear that society is a system, and of course just like all other systems, it is always running into problems, and these problems need to be solved if the system is to continue running or if the system is to continue operating a certain way, and these are called functional prerequisites. So this is adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and latency or pattern maintenance, you can also call it AGIL. And this is about functional imperatives, or shall we say prerequisites. This is for all action systems. There is no action system that can survive without them or any of them. You need all of them. They are all equally important. It's not like one of them is more important, the other is not. It is a complex of activities directed towards meeting a need or meeting needs of the system. So basically Parsons is looking at this, and he also defines function here. He says function is, he defines function in terms of what a part does, or what a part of a social system did with respect to meeting the functional prerequisites. So function is what a part of a social system did with respect to meeting the functional prerequisites. So you have, I don't want to go into the details of what each of these is, and Parsons of course has written about this. So without that, let's just, keeping that aside because that might require more time, let's just quickly look at this AGIL scheme. And in this AGIL scheme, he also draws connections between the systems. So for example, if you're looking at AGIL, this is the organismic system, this is the personality system, this is the social system, and this is the cultural system. So that's how he brings together his interlocking, interacting systems. So the connections he drew between functional prerequisites and the different action systems. So the behavioral organism is the action system that handles the adaptation function by adjusting to and transforming the external world. The personality system performs the goal attainment function by defining system goals and mobilizing resources to attain them. The social system copes with the integration function by controlling its component parts. And the cultural system performs the latency function by providing actors with the norms and values that motivate them for action. So this is your AGIL, but of course, there are criticisms. The criticism is that the descriptive potential, while the descriptive potential needs to be appreciated, it is a fairly interesting idea, but it is just too abstract. And scholars have pointed out that it is very difficult to kind of apply it, as a model. It's very difficult to apply it because it is so grand and it is so also abstract. So the descriptive potential is great, but when it comes to applying this particular theory, it is near impossible. Then the other criticism of AGIL schemes is that it simply refuses to take historical change into account. It does not really look at, or it does not attend to processes, how certain structures come into being. What are the processes through which a structure acquires a certain form and shape? This is something that is not looked at. So it's the criticism is to do with its ahistorical nature. Its ahistorical nature does not look at processes. Critics also argue that Parsons' theory is very, very static. They say inexcusably static, and it lacks the flexibility to meet instances of social change. So generally speaking, it is, I think it's AGIL. You can always, oops, you can erase it. Let me go back to the pen. So it's A, then it's G, and then it's I, and then it's L. AGIL. So this is the organismic system, personality system, social system, and then the cultural system. Now this is what the figure, if you just draw this figure and you simply write functional paradigm of system of social action, or you write structure of the general action system, this will do, right? So these are the 4 action systems, and I have also pointed out that they do not exist in the real world. They are analytical tools for analyzing the real world. So basically, the social system constitutes the subject matter of sociology, and the other subsystems constitute the environment of the social system, what I refer to the ecology of sociology. So you have biology taking care of the organismic system, you have psychology taking care of the personality system, you have sociology taking care of the social system, and you have anthropology taking care of the cultural system. So Parsons is very clear that this earlier conception, wherein he was talking about social action in terms of voluntaristic aspect, he is now coming to a situation wherein he studies social action only when it is patterned or culturally shaped. So he makes a move from what is called the study of structure of social action to the study of structure of general action system. So he is no more looking at social action, he is looking at an entire action system. And it is here that he brings in status, role, complex, bundle, and he does not only talk about motivations, thoughts, etc. So you have all of that in place. Then there is also, in this broad context, because we are looking at moving equilibrium, and we are looking at also so pattern variables. So AGIL, very quickly in the context of the same, there are 2 things that we can also, so there is social control and there is social change. You have social control and you have social change. Now remember, social control is something that functionalists talked about a great deal. They did not talk about social change, and for that they were of course criticized a great deal. But Parsons does something fantastic. He brings together this and formulates a theory which is quite interesting. So basically, to begin with, when he talks about control, Parsons is very clear that control, he goes against the Enlightenment theorists like Thomas Hobbes and others, who believe that control or conflict can only be prevented by the use of force. So these are more of realists. Now Parsons is pointing out that this will not really help after a point, because prevention of conflict through force can only work for a short duration. So till the time you have force, conflict is prevented. But what happens when the force is not there? Are we going to then prevent the conflict? Then that does not really happen. So if you have to really have a mechanism in place as a result of which conflict does not take place, you have to think beyond force. So Parsons is not in agreement with the likes of Thomas Hobbes, who believe that for prevention of conflict, you have to have force. Parsons does not believe in it. So Parsons actually then talks about the ways in which social order is established in society for long periods of time through norms and values. And it is here that the role of the cultural system becomes absolutely pivotal, right? It becomes very, very important. So it does not use force, but it kind of influences us in ways that we end up falling in line. We end up becoming, as it were, the right members, or the rightly socialized members of the society. So the cultural system establishes norms and values in society, and as a result of the establishment of norms and values in society, the conflict is prevented for a long period of time. So there are two processes in all societies through which we can make sense of how control is brought about. One is called socialization and the other is called social control. So socialization is the process by which norms and values of the cultural system are inculcated by actors so that they are motivated to play roles the right way. And he talks about socialization as, he does not really get into agencies of socialization or socialization as a lifelong process. Basically, he talks about values, beliefs, languages, and other symbols that play a very important role. So these things are introduced into the personality system. In that, we internalize them, and then in the social system, we behave the way in which we are supposed to, thanks to the influence of the cultural system. So if there is a successful socialization process, then the values and norms are simply internalized. So basically, in that situation, what happens is whatever the society wants, we also want. So there is no discrepancy between the actors and the society. Even when actors are carrying out their own interests, they are basically carrying out the interests of society. So there is no discrepancy. So the actors are in fact serving the interests of the system as a whole. So there are three kinds of socialization. I'm sure you're already aware of: social socialization, cultural, and psychic. But social control, which is what he calls mechanism of social control, this comes into being when a person is not performing his or her role effectively as per the expectations of others. In other words, we could say when socialization has not really done its part really well. So it is the process of reducing the possibility of deviance. Social control comes in when the chances of deviance actually go up. So to kind of reduce the possibility of deviance, social control comes in. Social sanctions are always there for deviance, to check deviance in its tracks. So social control is there for actors who do not play their roles according to the norms and values. So for example, you have formal ways in which social control is carried out, rules and laws. Then you have informal ways in which it is carried out, so through family, through peer groups, etc., peer pressure. And then there are coercive mechanisms enforced when the first two do not work. So there is a possibility that you will be penalized. There's a possibility that you are put behind the bars. You can actually have all kinds of degrees through which social control is brought in. Now, when it comes to Parsons' theory of social control, what is interesting is that there is a remarkable insistence on what we call persistence of society and regulating the behavior of so persistence of society with reference to regulating the behavior of the individual actor. Now, lastly, in relation to social change. When it comes to social change, what we refer to, you have evolutionary universals, you have pattern variables, and there is another thing called moving equilibrium or dynamic equilibrium. Now, remember, I pointed out just a while back that functionalists were criticized left, right, and center for not talking about social change. And Parsons comes up with an exceptionally intelligent formulation. So Parsons presents this formulation of social change within the broader context of his theory of social system. Now, he talks about social change in a way that it is, of course, a theory of social change, but it talks about order. And that's a brilliant way of bringing the two together. So he presents a dynamic understanding of order. So when he talks about social change, it's basically a dynamic understanding of order. that order is not something that is given and static all the time. It's constantly acquiring new forms, new shapes. He presents a dynamic understanding of order by referring to what is famously called moving equilibrium, right? Now, equilibrium we are aware of. I'm not going into the details, but he talks about the system's tendency vis-a-vis maintaining equilibrium. So this idea that the self-maintaining equilibrium tendency that the system has always restores the social system. So the social system has self-maintained equilibrium, and so any disturbance in any part or one part of the social system leads to restoration of the system back to equilibrium. So there's disturbance and there is back to equilibrium. So you have E1, then there is disturbance, another equilibrium, E2, disturbance, another equilibrium, E3. So every time the system comes back to its state of equilibrium, it is not the same equilibrium, which is why Parsons would have us believe that it is something like E1, E2, E3. So this is moving dynamic equilibrium. So while discussing equilibrium, we must also look at how Parsons conceptualized system. So system has what he calls self-equilibrating tendency. So a cooling system, there's a certain temperature that is set, and it will make sure that that temperature is maintained. Every time the temperature goes up or goes down, there's a certain mechanism that is in place, and as a result of that, the system is back on that maintained temperature. But he also pointed out that in the case of a system, the equilibrium is not a fixed state, meaning it is something that is dynamic. It implies that continuously the equilibrium of the system tends to get disturbed. He's not saying it does not. Continuously it tends to get disturbed, and continuously the system tries to restore the state of equilibrium. So basically this is how he points out that it's a continuous process of adjustment and modification. Continuous process of adjustment and modification within the system in order to restore equilibrium. So it just goes on and on and on. Continuous process of adjustment and modification. So for Parsons, equilibrium is not a fixed state, it is a dynamic state, and it is a continuous process. It's a dynamic process and it's a continuous process. So through this particular theory of moving equilibrium, dynamic equilibrium, what he points out, or what he ends up pointing out, is that there is change, but if you look at the broader idea, he is basically talking about order. So it's a very intelligent formulation that he ends up discussing change in brilliant ways, but the system that he's still referring to is one that is constantly going towards order. So there is change, but this change is, of course, about order. The other thing that is also in relation to social change is the 4 stages that he refers to, which is a very evolutionary understanding of change that Parsons has. So he talks about structural differentiation, which is the first stage, that the structure differentiates into different, with the changes happening in the society, the structure differentiates, meaning there are new parts or there are new components that emerge, there are new requirements that emerge. So there is structural differentiation. Then there is functional adaptation, that's the second stage. So structure differentiates, then there is functional specialization, then there is adaptive upgradation, and there is social integration. So these are the 4 ways in which 4 stages: structural differentiation, functional specialization, adaptive upgradation, and social integration. So if you can refer to this in relation to Parsons' broader theory of social change, that will be fantastic. So with this, we come to an end of this particular discussion on Parsons. I sincerely hope that whatever was discussed in this particular unit, you liked it and you enjoyed it, and more importantly, you found something of worth, of value, of benefit, and of course you took a note of those things. And I sincerely hope that the value addition offered, some of the pointers offered during the discussion, were of some use vis-a-vis your mains preparation. Thank you very much once again for your patience, and I'll see you very soon with Merton, on the table. Till then, take care, all the very best, and I'll see you.